Welcome to another episode of the Wild Strength Podcast. Today, my guest is Kerri McAllister, and his walk-up song is Fade to Black by Iron Horse. That's so crazy of me.
Dude, Metallica with banjos, like it doesn't get cooler than that, you know?
Is it just an instrumental?
No, they start singing. Yeah, they do the whole song.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
put it off soon because I'm gonna end up singing with it.
Yeah. I want to show everyone your amazing singing skills.
Yeah, I guess you got a story about that. I'll tell you later.
Okay, sweet. Anyway, like I said, we have Kerri McAllister. I met him through Hunt, Lift, Eat, which for those of you who are unfamiliar, started as an apparel company, but they now have a membership of people who all across the country who I've met quite a few amazing people through. And then Kerri was at the Mile High Hunt Expo earlier in the year, and that was kind of where we had first met in person. And then last week, I recorded a podcast with Hunt, Lift, Eat, and we kind of just got into a lot about Kerri's background in the military and all of that. But I'll let him introduce himself, tell a little bit about himself, and then, yeah, as always, we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me on, and thank you for playing Metallica with banjos. But yeah, my name's Kerri. I retired from the Army after a little over 20 years. Most of that was as a Green Beret. I'm a part of Hunt Lift Eat. I'm the operations coordinator for the headquarters side of the house, for the business side, as well as do a lot on the team membership side. So, yeah, it's really cool to get to meet guys like you and other people that we have come across throughout this program that we're with. But yeah, I'm retired now. I live with my wife in Kentucky. She's still active duty Army, and I call myself a professional adventurer now. So all I do is play in the woods, hunt, fish, and lift weights.
I love that, professional adventurer. I talk a lot about, like, I never know what I want to be when I grow up, but I think that's it. I think professional adventurer
Yep.
is definitely what I want to be. And obviously, as you're retired, you get the joy to do whatever the hell you want to do. So that's the best part.
Yeah. I mean, it comes at a cost to retire the way I did, but
Right.
it's. I don't have to worry about making a dollar amount. I don't have to worry about finding that job that pays the exact what I need. Like I can do what I want, and still live a relatively comfortable life, financial wise. So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I talk about that all the time. Like, I wanted to go into the military right out of high school, and my mom was not having it. She would not let me do that. And in hindsight, after I've spent so many years working with military, I kind of have, it's a double-edged sword, kind of like you said. It comes with a cost. So it's like, I could have done my 20 years. I could have retired relatively early. I could be making a decent amount of retirement depending on what I did, all of those kinds of things. But then sometimes, yeah, like you were a Green Beret. You spent years like just tearing your body down. So it definitely comes at a cost. Like maybe your retirement looks vastly different than someone else's retirement.
Yeah. I mean, I'm medically retired. You want to talk about beating yourself up? And it wasn't from. I mean, I had like certain incidents that were kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
But it wasn't like I didn't get shot. I didn't get blown up. It's just a lot of wear and tear, and then like something sort of major happens. Like I had a partial parachute malfunction that just kind of sealed the deal for me. And then prior to that, I had a nasty fall in Iraq. But yeah, medically retired. So that's the other thing. I'm 100% disabled, so that definitely helps with my professional adventuring. But
For
yeah,
sure.
so it came at a cost. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, we had talked about last time we spoke. You spent time in the military, and as you just said, kind of just really beat yourself down. But for those who are unfamiliar with now even conventional military, the Army at large has something that is similar, but really special operations was the first to kind of pilot this holistic health and performance program. And in the Army specifically, they call it Thor. Tactical Human Optimization and Rapid Rehabilitation, if I remember correctly, is what it stands
And
for.
recovery. And
Yes,
recovery.
yep. And so, yeah, you have a full-time strength and conditioning coach, a dietitian, a physical therapist, an athletic trainer. Any profession you can think of that falls in the human performance realm, these guys have access to them, which has, I mean, relatively new in the last like 10 to 12 years, has this been a thing, but special operations was really the first to pilot that in the military. And that was kind of where Kerri and I really connected. Obviously, I have spent time as a strength coach with that group. And then he himself was a Green Beret. And he really kind of mentioned how that had helped him. He found it a little bit later in his career in the Army. But Kerri, speak a little bit more to that and how just like the training side of things, human performance, not only just like helped you in your career, but how you felt like maybe it even prolonged your career a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, first off, that Thor 3 program and other units have different names for it, and I don't know them all, but the
Yeah.
same program across the Special Operations Command, like that is the greatest thing SOCOM has ever done for its guys. Like I don't care about the equipment, the vehicles, the weapons, like that's fine. We did just fine wearing the old web gear and the old big giant Kevlars, but that Thor 3, was it took guys like me, I found about 10 years into my career. But like prior to them, it was you run 4 days a week, you ruck 1 day a week, and you do like bodybuilding splits that you find in Men's Health, right? So like we weren't training properly. It was a lot of just kind of grit and just being a tough, like to get through the things that we went through. There wasn't a lot of like the internet was there, but it wasn't as available as it is now as far as a lot of like the programming and coaches and stuff like that. And so when Thor came on board and they poached collegiate and professional level strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists, nutritionists, sports psychologists, all these things. They kind of formed this team to help us. And to be honest, I came in at kind of bullheaded. I'm like, I don't need somebody to tell me how to work out. Especially I'm like, how are you going to tell me how to be better for combat? You ever been shot at?
Yeah.
I had an attitude. Turns out it was the greatest thing that I've ever done in the military as far as like prolonging my health. Because it wasn't just somebody handing me a program and telling me to go. It was an educational experience, right? So your coach, here's the program. This is why you're doing this. This is what this exercise does, and this is how it correlates to your job. And this, they even taught you how to program. So like while I still prefer to go find a coach, like I've got a baseline understanding on how to program for different events that I'm going to be going through. The nutritionist teaching you about, like that breakdown of the carbs, the proteins, the fats, and like really teaching you how to eat holistically and healthy, right? And then the sports psychologist kind of helping you keep that kind of mind muscle stuff connected and everything like that. And then the physical therapist, those came in handy. I had one. Uh, she I told her job is to keep me on a team, right? She told me many times, you need to leave the team. You're too beat up, you're too broken, you need to leave the team. And I said, her name was Tara, and I was like, Tara, your job is to keep me on the team. Like, do
Yeah.
what we got to do. And unfortunately, she got really close to keeping me on a team till I retired, because my whole goal in life was the only way I wanted to leave a team, right, was either with retirement orders or in a body bag. And so
You and everyone.
obviously, yeah, and so it didn't quite work out, but she got me real close. But yeah, all those ladies and gentlemen that work at Thor, man, they were such a huge help, such a huge blessing to the entire special operations, especially the
Yeah.
Special Forces Regiment. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
amazing.
It's so
Yeah,
cool to hear. And obviously, like I've worked with guys and heard like similar things, but for you to now have gone through it, you're removed from it, and you can go back in hindsight and like speak to what it has done for you and your career, and now your life, like you mentioned, outside of retiring. Because exactly like you said, we run into so many guys in that setting and in that population who are like, you're gonna tell me how to work out? Like I'm a heavy hitter. I work out 3 times a day. I run three
yeah,
times a day. I ruck 3 times a day. Like who are you to tell me what I need to be doing for my training? Exactly like you said. Like you guys have never been in combat. You've never been in a firefight. So how can you even relate to what I'm doing? Like why should I listen to you? But I think like from my perspective and like my role as a coach is to, yeah, I've never been there. I've never been where you've been. I'll never go where you're going. But how can we maybe even dial back what you're doing, right? Because a lot of even the trainings that you guys do are physically exhausting. Just your day to day, even when you're not deployed, are physically exhausting. And then you go on a combat deployment and you're already depleted because you're physically exhausted from what you've been
Yep.
doing here stateside.
Your
But
sea
that's
ice
what,
is fried before even touching ground.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So, and that's what ends up ultimately tearing you down. So, like you said, to come in as a coach, as a physical therapist, a dietitian, whomever, like we're a whole team of people, but our goal at the end of the day is to educate you guys. And how can we at least get you to listen and learn and understand one small concept that is going to help you, because it really is like building blocks, right? If you at least, you know what, I like to eat healthy, so if nothing else, I'm going to get my nutrition dialed in. But then you realize, well, now that my nutrition's dialed in, like now I can do differently in the gym. And then you start tying all of these different realms together. And then you're like, wow, I can feel really good at my job versus feeling like shit all the time.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's a completely, people say game changer about a lot of things, but it was definitely a game changer. And while you're doing it because the coach tells you, and it's kind of crazy because I didn't realize how much I was learning from them until I was away from them. You
Mm,
know, so like my first year post retirement, I lost access to all the physical therapy and stuff. The day I signed down on terminal leave, I moved to Kentucky because my wife was already stationed here. So like all the physical therapists, all the strength coaches that I had instant connection to, and I had one that was off post who was a former Thor, well, the unit's version of Thor physical therapist who was amazing. Like you lose access to that, and then I'm in an area where they've never talked to a special operator, let
yeah.
alone treated one. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
so, I walk in and I'm like, hey, to the physical therapist here, and I'm like, hey, here's my med records. Here's the big things. Like, I got medically retired for 10 different injuries that they said were so bad I couldn't continue even if I wanted to. So I walked in with that, and they had no idea what to do. Like, well, here's some stretches, here's some exercises. I'm like, dude, I don't need you to tell me how to exercise. I was like, this is the treatments that I've been getting. I would like to continue. And they just don't grasp it. So I had to kind of sit back and go, all right, I don't have that crutch where I can just call my physical therapist and get an appointment with her. I can't just call my strength coach. And, not that they wouldn't have helped me, but I'm no longer the priority. I'm a retiree, like
Right.
they don't have to talk to me. So I started going back and just started thinking about the stuff that they taught me, stuff that the nutritionist taught me, especially as I was kind of battling gut issues after one of my deployments where I got incredibly sick. So doing all that stuff the nutritionist taught me, doing all the stuff that strength conditioning coaches taught me, and then like my whole first year after retiring, like I worked out almost every day, but it was very much a physical therapy type workout, like just trying to get back in. Because I mean, that first year that I was out, like I was hurting when I retired. I was bad,
Mm.
bad that first year I was out. And then, it doesn't help when you're a professional adventurer and your life revolves around hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors and you can't walk without a cane. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it was awesome. So I got to take those lessons learned that I didn't realize I learned until much later and start applying them. And now, I mean, here I am, almost 2 years post retirement. I feel way better than I had. Like I feel like now some days it kind of bites me in the ass, but some days I'm like, I can go back and do team stuff again. Like I can totally do this,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And then I go do something stupid and I take a couple steps back. But for the most part, I feel a lot better. My nutrition is on point. Like I've reduced a lot of the chronic pain that I had. The workouts that I'm doing, instead of typical army fashion where they're like, hey, if that hurts, don't do it. Right? You're on profile. Go sit somewhere. Like I started going back. Like I started deadlifting again. Like my entire spine is just completely obliterated. My hip needs replaced. I started deadlifting again. Whereas before I would do rack pulls and still get relatively heavy, so I could still train that partial range of motion. And I'm like, this is great. I was like, but I've got to move. Like you got to kind of retrain your body to move, like the physical therapists were trying to get me to do. you know. And
Hmm.
so, like, I mean, I'm pulling 65 to 95 pounds, but I've worked my way down to I'm actually pulling off the floor again, and even though like 95 pounds is not nothing, it's pretty much nothing in deadlift numbers. But for me, about 3-4 years post like major injury, pulling that's pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that stuff and like just yeah,
I would say the same, and I think I have to have a laugh because even though you say like, oh, 95 pounds of a deadlift isn't much, it unfortunately takes, especially guys of your caliber, to experience something where maybe your physicality is even taken away from you for a period of time, to recognize like, I do need to step back. I do need to slow it down a little bit. I do need to take better care of myself because like we most people have the utmost respect for guys who do what you do because of what you put yourselves through. And we know, and I know, like even in my research, like the human body is capable of amazing things. And I think like people who are in special operations are the best to look at when you want to see those things because like you said, you just like fry your central nervous system until you can't anymore, and you tear your body down until you can't anymore. So it's admirable to know that people are willing to do those things and put themselves through those things, whether the reason might not be admirable, right? But like, I think some people, just in conversations I have, I think some people do it for the wrong reasons. But even then, you're still willing to put yourself out there, which is admirable. I don't know that most guys, and kind of what you've alluded to, recognize what you're doing until, yeah, after you're to a point where you can't maybe do it anymore. And then to just be able, like, I can even hear it in your voice that you're like, oh my God, I can deadlift 95 pounds. Like, it might not sound like much, but you seem very excited that you're able to deadlift 95 pounds, which I think is awesome.
I mean, just the fact I can pick something up that close to the floor, is it's a huge accomplishment from where I was.
For
So
sure. Yeah. And just getting that like range of motion back in, sometimes it takes, even if it's, say, maybe it's not an injury or like, or something smaller than kind of what you experienced. Like, I'll often tell people, even if I'm working with like someone who's a power lifter and they are like, just every single time they squat, maybe they're experiencing like some degree of hip pain or knee pain or back pain or whatever. And I've even done this myself. Like, I used to compete in powerlifting and it tore me up. So I had to start completely over, like go back to ground one. I'm just squatting the barbell. What can I do to adjust my movement pattern so that, like, with no weight or little to no weight, that movement pattern feels good? And then I can start to rebuild that strength in a new movement pattern, which is ultimately kind of what you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. And I've only done one powerlifting meet. It was the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. It was like going to the doctor and waiting for your name to come up to do one lift. But
Yeah.
but the training for it, yeah, it can definitely tear you up. Yeah, but I mean, you want to talk about like difficult? It's mentally difficult going from being able to do those things. So like, not only was I spent almost about a decade on an ODA, and I did 9 deployments before I finally got hurt and I couldn't do any more. But like even while I was doing that, I was competing in strongman. I did a couple strongman competitions, a couple Highland game competitions, a couple powerlifting competitions. So like my identity while on a team was not only team guy, but it was also like I'm the strong guy, you know. And then
Mhm.
you take an injury where you can't even get in the position to
Yeah.
lift that weight anymore. Like that's a huge hit, and I don't want to say it's ego, but maybe it is. But it definitely kind of just jacks you up mentally. Like I'm no longer who I was. You know?
Yeah. So I think some of it is ego, but there's a lot of research, maybe even more so in military, but a lot of research in athletes, like psych related research, where even if you just played at the collegiate level, or especially if you go on to play at a pro level, and then you retire, like that's just what you know, right? You know, being strong, you know, pushing yourself to the limits, you know, being deployed, going on combat deployments, or an athlete knows playing football all the time. They know like that's their day to day. And then you reach a point where either A, you can't do it anymore because of injury, or B, you've retired, you've played that sport, or you've been in the military for X amount of time, and now it's your time to move out. And now you don't know who you are anymore because your whole identity is tied to doing that one thing, which is like, even me, like I don't do a lot of coaching anymore, but oftentimes when people are like, "Oh, what do you do?" I start with, "I used to be a coach, but now I do
Yeah.
this," because your identity is tied to, or my identity is tied to coaching, and like, who am I outside of a coach? And it's taken me time to like figure that out. But I think that just that brings in a whole another conversation of like just having things that you're doing outside of
Yeah.
work, or outside of your job or outside of sport if you're an athlete, so that if that is ever taken away from you, because inevitably a time will come where it is taken away from you, like who are you, and are you still able to show up as someone other than just that?
You're absolutely right. I mean, you want to talk about jacking you up mentally, 20 years of GWAT and all of a sudden it's over. Holy crap, man. Like what a just turmoil, like just crazy world, man. When you live a life that like that, whether you're a collegiate athlete or do what I did, like from in my case, my whole world revolved around the war. I joined the army 1 month before 9/11. I actually joined the National Guard. 9/11 happened, so I put in for a conditional release and went active. I went active early 2002 and until November of 22. Like that was all that mattered to me was the global war on terror, right? So it was Afghanistan, Iraq, and then eventually, became Africa, and then some stuff in Syria and things like that. And so my whole world was focused on that. And like I told you, there was only two ways I wanted to leave a team, and that was either in a body bag or with retirement orders. And I got cut short on that one. So in a way, I think that was almost a blessing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a blessing that I got cut short doing that stuff prior to basically starting with my retirement stuff, because I was still in the community, and so I had already experienced a little bit of that loss, but it wasn't completely gone. Right, I was still going to work. I was still with the boys. Still doing that stuff. Still conducting special operations. Just now I'm more on the backside support, because I'm ended up moving down to the operations, S3 down in the battalion. And so I was still a part of it, but even it was gone, right? And I had two amazing teammates that were bow hunters, and I had never hunted before. And then, totally way off topic, we can get into that some other point. But I had just gotten divorced from a vegan, so
Yes.
yeah, I just gotten divorced from a vegan. We deployed to Iraq right after that. I got hurt in Iraq, came home, kept trying to play through the pain, and then had a partial parachute malfunction where I walked off the drop zone, but it was just like I said, it was kind of the camel or the straw on the camel's back that just kind of broke me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up basically having to sit in front of my boss and be like, guys, I don't think I can play anymore. Like I've got to go find something else to do. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the hardest things I had to, do, right? To actually go tell somebody like, I've got to come off a team.
Yeah.
This is my physical therapist telling me that if I want to walk after I retire, I need to stop. you know, and so but I had two guys on my team. One was my team leader, and one was my weapons sergeant. And they were big hunters. My team leader was a huge bow hunter, and this was summer of 19, I think. And they're like, "Do you go buy a bow?" And so my birthday's in August, and so my wife now, who was my girlfriend at the time, ended up buying me like a really cheap starter bow, like like basically it come out of the box and it's got your quiver and your sight and everything you need, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm shooting with that. I fell in love with shooting my bow in the backyard. Opening day of deer season rolls around. My buddy's like, "Hey man, be at my house at 4 a.m." So I get there and he goes, "This is a climber. This is how it works. You're gonna get in this tree and you're gonna come down. I think at 9 or 10 or whatever it was." So I'm like, "All right." So I get up there and I had a black bear walk under my stand,
Mm.
and so I was completely hooked. Right, like from that moment, like I didn't shoot the black bear because I wasn't hunting black bear, but like, dude, how cool is this? Like, I am now like I'm not just observing nature, like I'm a part of it, right? And so I get done with that hunt, and then the boys fucked off to Africa on a trip, like shortly after. So like, you got me obsessed with hunting, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that kind of lit a fire under me, right? So like, there was before, like the war was. what I was focused on. So my life revolved around, training revolved around, like everything was focused towards the war effort, right? And the next deployment, the next deployment. And so I found that kind of new thing, which was hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm a public land hunter because I don't have my own property. And so that goes back to the training piece, right? So I've got to train for this, but I've got to work around these injuries so I can still get out there. If I kill something, I got to get it back and still be able to function. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where this whole professional adventure thing actually kind of stemmed from. I had no idea what I wanted to do after I retired. Like, no idea. I was surprised I lived long enough to retire, So
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of thought for it. But, and as you're getting closer to retirement, you'll have all these briefings and people come to talk to you. And one of the things that people always say is like, your identity is not a Green Beret. Like, that's not who you are. Like, that's not your identity. And they're trying to get you prepped for once you're out, right? But I think it's complete bullshit. Just like, you're a coach. Whether you're physically coaching right now or not, you're a coach. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm retired. I'm a Green Beret, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have been for a long time and I always will be. That is part of my identity. However, I think you need to have other things to go along with your identity. And that's something that I didn't have until that black bear walking on my stand. So,
Yeah. So many interesting things. One, I want to start with were you also a vegan when you were married to a vegan?
oh my God. So, no. So she didn't allow meat in the house, but I kept milk and eggs, and then I'd have my friends cook like extras at home and then bring it to work for me. It it's such a long story, but it was the most miserable 8 years of my life, and I'm super happy to be done with that.
Happens to us. We all have.
Yeah, no, it was rough. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that was
and,
just
and
good.
I was gonna say, and that's the other thing too. We talked about nutrition a little bit too. You want to talk about performance suffering because of your nutrition? Yeah, go vegan.
That's why I asked. I was, I'm curious if you were also vegan. Like, wow, that was while you were in that marriage. But we all have that one, and maybe multiple people where it's like, what the hell was I thinking?
Yep. Yep.
um, But yeah, and then you kind of mentioned the identity piece of it, and I find that very interesting. And most people who have worked with military, and even maybe some who haven't worked with military, are very aware of this. That the transition, they don't make the transition out easy or simple or anything like that. It is like one day you are a Green Beret, the next day you are like nothing. You're nobody
Yep.
because, like you said, you're that's not your identity. But the kind of people who sign up to be a Green Beret, who sign up to be a Navy SEAL, who sign up to do these things, like they're oftentimes looking for an identity. They're looking for like who can I be in my life, and what can I do with my life, and where can I tie myself to. And it's, gosh, that's a whole other can of worms. The kind of people that recruiters end up, I feel like I say recruiters are like eating at the wrong kind of people intentionally
Yeah.
because they know that they're going to get sucked into it. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, they end up becoming incredible men and now women because of what they've been through. Um, but yeah, there is this kind of like existential crisis, and you don't oftentimes have time to do other things, right? Like
Yeah.
if you are home and stateside, you're TDY or you're doing some sort of training, and very little or more than likely, you don't have a lot of time to go bow hunting if that was something that you did when you were in. You don't have time to go climbing mountains if that's something that you want. Like maybe once a year you get the time to do
Yeah.
that. But I meet so many guys who are in special operations and that I've worked with who are dying to have a life outside of being a Green Beret, right? Like they
Yep.
are envious of the coaches, of the dietitians, of all these people who have lives because they don't have time to have lives. And so for the army to tell you to be like, oh, this is not your identity, like you need to find something else is blasphemy because you don't even have
Yeah. And my thing is like, if that's not who you are, you're probably not very good at it. You
correct.
know. So like,
Correct.
it's when you go into any special operations unit, like you're all in. Your life is now special operations. And there's a quote talking about it being a mistress. I got to look that up and share it with you later. I
I've
can't
seen
think off the top
something
of my
about
head.
that, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's true. Like that's who you are. Like I've got two divorces to show for it. The second one was one that I was very glad to get away from because I was a vegan. Like
Uh-huh.
guys have a hard time. Like it's hard to find that work life balance when you are a special operator. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Like sure, I've got two divorces and I'm beat to hell, but like it's who I was. It's still who I am. You know, but those guys that are getting out, we've got such a huge, and you're aware of this suicide epidemic within special operations, which military as a whole. And if you really look across the population across the entire U.S., like it seems like dudes are off of themselves left and right. But
Yeah.
especially within the soft community, and it's for a couple of reasons, right? So for one, um, the people that are in special operations, they're decisive and they're violent, right? So when they decide to be violent, they're going to be violent.
Hmm.
But the other thing is a lot of them, the ones that do it post military, it's it's that loss of identity, it's that loss of mission, right? So what I try to tell people, and I went through this. My whole first year beat up. I was in a lot of pain. I didn't have my support network that I had back at Bragg. I didn't have my mission. I didn't have my fight, right? And so like I went through a lot of those same issues, and I think honestly, what saved my life uh, was the fact that I stopped drinking about 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing too is a lot of special operators tend to try to drown their demons with booze, and that's you know you talk about nutrition, nothing good about booze, right? And then that loss of identity, right? So like I tell people now, like for one, quit drinking, and then find a fight. You've got to find a fight. You've got to find your reason. You got to find your new mission, right? So for me, my fight now is for one the professional adventure thing. I want to do cool shit, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, After so many years of having to sneak meat, I want to find out what every critter tastes like, uh, and
Yeah.
then I want to help as many people out along the way, right? So through the outdoors, through all this stuff, I want to be able to help people. Obviously, special operators are going to be at the top of that list of people I want to help, but I want to help as many people as I possibly can. And so that's my new fight. And so my new identity is I'm a professional adventurer. You
Yeah.
know
And
that
I
wants
think,
to help people.
yeah, I love that. And you bring up a really good point. Like the people, if it is not your identity, if it is not what you are putting, and one of my favorite like sayings is, I'm going to use my whole ass. I'm not going to half-ass anything. Like if there's anything that I want to do, I'm putting my whole self into it. I'm giving it 100% of my effort because I know when I do that, the outcome is because I put my all into it. It is not because I just dipped my toes in the water. And so I think
Yep.
exactly correct what you said. Those are the kind of people we need for that job. I do not want someone who is going in combat, who is in war, who is just like, this sounds fun. Like this is just something that I wanted to do. No, I hope and pray that everyone who is putting themselves in that situation, that is their identity, that is who they are, and they are putting 100% effort into that. And I think that's how you become the best at what you do with anything, right? Not just a Green Beret, not just being a coach, with anything. If you put
Yeah.
your whole ass into it, that's how you become the best at what you do. And if you don't do that and you don't want to be the best at it, cool, but maybe don't do that thing and
Yeah.
find something that you can be really good at and that you can potentially work to be. It, maybe you never are the best, but you're like working to be the best at it, which
It's definitely my case. I was never the best, but I
yeah,
was surrounded by the best. And so like you have to work hard to keep up. Now, fortunately, the guys who are not in it because that's who they want, that's who they are. Those guys don't generally make it to group or
for sure.
past buzz or through rasp or whatever unit they're going out for. Most of those guys don't quite make it there, and the few that do, we call them like slip through the cracks. They
Mhm.
usually don't last too long.
Right.
Um,
I was gonna
but
say they never make it to retirement because they get out at like 6 years, 8 years.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, and I mean, and you're surrounded by it, like you said, like these dudes. That's who they are, and they are the best of the best. Like the best people in the world are in special operations, I think. And
Yeah.
so, like, I'm surrounded by just absolute legends when I go to work or when I went to work every day. I was surrounded by like big dudes who are legends, right? The team I was on had two Medal of Honor winners from Afghanistan, or recipients. Winner sounds bad. you know. And so
Well,
like you're surrounded by not only like people physically there around you that are just the best people in the world, like you're also like you're flying the same colors as these guys that did just absolutely amazing shit. And so like for you to not want to be all in, like it's kind of a slap in the face to like everybody around you, you know.
yeah, yeah, I think that's
But
awesome, and I would agree. Even just like I think working around those people, being around those people, like truly, you feel like you're in the presence of greatness. And not even just because they're the best. I mean, they are. Most of them are the best of the best. But like, oftentimes, and you probably didn't even think this until you were removed from it. Like those guys are the most humble people, unless if they came straight out of what is the army college called? Well, I don't know.
West Point.
Yeah, West Point. The guys who came out of West Point, they are not very humble. Sorry if anyone's listening to this and you went to West Point, but that's just how it goes. But other than that, like the most humble guys that I've ever met, and like to see the things that they do and for how humble they are, like it's incredible to me.
Yeah, yeah, such a huge honor. And I mean, I got to do it for so a little over 15 years of my career was in special forces, and I mean, I am not one of those giant amongst men kind of people at all. But I
Yeah.
was surrounded by them, and it was such a cool experience. But I mean, and while the special operation community is just an absolutely amazing group of men and women, like I've honestly found that same quality of people through Hunt Lift Eat that were never in the military, right?
Mhm.
And what I'm noticing is guys who are especially bow hunters, right? Those people I seem to connect with really well because they a lot of those people that's who they are. You know, I'm a bow hunter, right? I'm an elk hunter, I'm a mule deer hunter, or I'm a public land whitetail guy or whatever it is, right?
Uh,
Those guys put so much dedication into their craft and physical fitness and all that. Like it reminds me very much of the type of dudes that I worked with when I was active duty. And that's kind of helped me out too, because now I'm even though I'm away physically from the boys at Bragg, like I'm connecting with people, through Hunt Lift Eat and stuff like that, um, that are still got that same drive and that same passion, and it's helped me kind of structure the way I live my life now. Is I still model it a lot like I did or we did when I was in the regiment, where we did red, amber, green cycles, right? So we had green cycle, that's hunting season, right? That's your green cycle. That's your deployment, right? That's your Afghan trip or your Iraq trip or whatever, right? And then you got red cycle immediately following. So red cycle is where you start replacing gear, that didn't work out or you wished you had, like while you were doing this and that, and you start working on individual skills and that kind of stuff. And so you're like, I've got to perfect my shot. I took a couple bad shots, so I'm perfecting that. And then you go into amber cycle, which is collective tasks now. So now I'm in the woods and I'm scouting and I'm putting pieces together and all that. That way, as soon as green cycle comes around, like I'm ready to roll. And a lot of guys that are that are bow hunters are doing the same things, and it's really cool to see. They just don't know that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. I love that you say that because I've noticed the exact same thing. And as I got in, I've kind of always been to the outdoors, but relatively new hunter in the last 3 to 4 years. But I've worked with military longer than that. And so, kind of two directions I'll take what I'm going to say. One is I realized that how I would train a hunter, whether it's your whitetail tree stand hunter or your backcountry elk hunter, is very similar to kind of like you mentioned and alluded to how I would train someone who's in the military, like how you're gearing up for a deployment and then you come back and you kind of like recover a little bit and then we have a period of time where we can kind of do anything and like prepare for whatever and then we very much go into specific training to get ready for season. But also like the thing that I love the most about working with military, and I've spent time with fire and law enforcement as well, is just the camaraderie that those people have. And the tribe is a word that gets thrown around in that community. The sense of like family, like just the relationships that I see these guys have with each other is admirable. And I love seeing that and I love seeing how they interact. But like to what we were saying earlier, I think those relationships are so strong because you go through such hard and challenging things together.
Yep.
And that is what hunting is. Like, hunting is not easy. You can go and sit in a tree stand for weeks on end and not see a single thing, but you still choose to show up every single day. You can go and backcountry hunt elk and like come around every tree you see in the forest and never see an elk, but you still choose to do it again the next year because of how much joy and fulfillment that it brought you. So I think, to your point of, you kind of see the same thing in hunters as you did with guys that you were with in the military, is it's just it is the want to do hard things, to do challenging things, to show up despite maybe failing time and time again. And then just the mindset that comes with that. Like, I've even kind of, like you said, I've met guys who, and women who are hunters, who have never been in the military but have a very similar mindset of, like, I just like to get out there and challenge myself. And I think
Yeah.
at the root of what anyone does who has a physical job in the military, they really just like to challenge themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's shared hardships, right? So it's bonding over shared hardships. And I've been to only a couple hunting camps, but I mean,
Mhm.
being in hunting camp with the dudes is a lot like being in like a combat outpost or something with the boys, right? The biggest difference is the animals don't tend to shoot back, but
Correct.
you
Not
know,
correct.
yeah. But for everything else, like you're out there and it's what do they call it, type two fun or whatever, where you're suffering but it's fun.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So you're bonding over shared hardships, but it's a fun hardship, right? Um, and then just the dedication, like you said, just to get out there and keep doing it. And then everybody I've come across in the hunting community, especially like I said, the bow hunting community, and I'm not knocking rifle hunters. In fact, I'm primarily a bow hunter, but I kill with a rifle, right? So I walk around the woods a lot with a bow,
Hmm.
but I usually put them down with a with a rifle. But but the guys that do bow hunt, I mean, it's that dedication. Is they're going to show up every day. They're going to go out. They're going to put in the work. They're going to put in the effort to get that animal, or to help somebody else get that animal. And everybody's been super helpful within the bow hunting community that I've come across to teach me. I mean, I'm coming up on my sixth season, and I've got about 20 animals under my belt in 6 seasons, or I'm sorry, 5 seasons, because this will be my sixth. And I got lucky once or twice and just happened to stumble upon an animal, but like for the most part, it's people in the hunting community
Hmm.
that have just kind of helped me, guided me, And then, to be fair, I also go to a high fence ranch and spend about a week there once a year.
Hey, different strokes for different folks. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think I had a very similar experience. And I think, like, my very first season, I got the biggest buck I've harvested to date. I keep saying, like, my first buck ever was a 10-point whitetail, and I'm like, I'll never shoot anything bigger than that. And then, yeah, I got a doe that season. I got two hogs that season. I got an axis doe, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, your first season! Like, that's so good!" And it was all free range too, um, but because of people who were just like willing to help. I ask questions. I ask, how can I get out there? Like, especially I started hunting in Texas where there's not a lot of public land out there.
Yeah.
So it's either knowing people who will let you come onto their property, or you just have to pay to play. Um, but I just met so many people in the bow shop that I was going to at the time who were like, "Oh, you want to get into hunting? Like, I got a free weekend. Let's do this." Or, "I know someone who could probably like let you come out this weekend. Like, I'll connect you with them and we can do that." And I think when you have the, like, put ego aside and you just genuinely want to learn, which is like at Green Beret, you're learning a lot of skills and things. And I think that's something that you've probably brought into hunting, is that you're willing to ask all of these questions and to get out there, because once again, back to what we were talking about, you just want to be the best at what you're doing. You just want to get
Yeah.
out there and do as much as you can. So you're going to ask all the questions so that you can be that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the more hunters we have, within reason, the better, right? Because it's all going to conservation. It's keeping all this stuff alive, and it's a lot like being on a team, right? I go on a team. those guys want to stay alive and do what they've got to do and be able to come home, right? And so they want everybody on the team to be as good as they possibly can be. So it's all about cross training, teaching, and stuff like that. Well, same thing in the hunting world. Those guys want hunting to continue, and in order for hunting to continue, we got to keep people hunting. And so that's been a really really cool experience because I mean, just like you know, I walked into a bow shop and I had no idea what I'm doing. Next thing you know, like some of my best friends are the bow techs that help me out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
always say anywhere, anytime I've like moved around a lot, and anytime I go, I like before I go, I look to see if there's a bow shop that's near where I'm at, and then inevitably, like when I first moved back here to Colorado Springs, the last time I lived here, I wasn't in archery, so I came back, found a bow shop out here, and I went in. It was like the first week of being here, and it's 8 minutes from where I live. So I go in
Nice.
there and I'm like, I'm just letting you guys know you're gonna get annoyed of me really fast. You're probably gonna end up kicking me out at one point. Like I'm gonna be here pretty often and I will not be offended if you tell me to leave. And they were like, oh no, that never happens. There's no way. And sure enough, like some months go by and one of them was like, you were kind of right. You are in here a lot. I told you, like, this is just like where I want to spend my time. This is what I like to do. This is how I meet people most times is through archery. And I have this conversation with friends all the time, but I've met so many incredible people, not even just through archery, but through, yeah, like hunt, lift, eat and hunting in general and the outdoors. Like, I just think, yeah, there's this shared sense of we all not only just enjoy doing the same thing, but we all enjoy like the challenge of putting food on the table at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you, like I spent probably more time than a person needs to spend in a bow shop. In fact, they made me a shop shooter because I was always there. So now I go in and help out about once a week or so.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like within you know, this community, so you talked about hunt, lift, eat, you know, and being making connections and all that. Like just being a part of this world has opened up so many doors for me. So I'm getting to meet some of the coolest people, you know, on this, you know, within the industry. I'm getting to meet those guys. Like, you know, hung out with you down at Mile High, and like I'm getting ready to take off to Alaska, and they're gonna pay me. You know,
Nice.
says this just from you know through hunt lift eat and through the hunting community. Like I ended up meeting an outfitter
Oh,
from
you
up in
did.
Alaska. What's that?
I think you did mention that last time we spoke.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but yeah, so I ended up meeting this outfitter and we just got to talking and hit it off. And he's like, you ever bear hunted? And I said, well, I had a bear walk in front of my stand twice. Does that count? You know? And he's like, man, so, you know, he wants to get special operators up there to do these bear hunts. And now he's added moose to it too. And he said, you know, he would love to take as many like Green Berets, Navy SEALs, whatever, right, up to do these hunts. He goes, but I want somebody that kind of speaks that language. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, I want to pay you to come up. I'm going to teach you how to guide for both bear and moose. And then every time we get a, you know, through like the Green Beret Foundation or something like that, every time we get a recipient to come up to hunt, we're going to fly you back up and you're going to guide that operator. So
Nice.
I'm getting ready to get on that. You want to talk about just awesome opportunities just for like asking questions and just kind of being involved and just, you know, trying to be a part of the community. Yeah, you want to talk about like my goal of being an adventurer and then helping people? I'm doing it.
That's awesome. I think that is such an incredible opportunity. And like you said, like those things don't come like yes, there's so many great people, but I think some of the people that I know will look at maybe things that I've done or like you're talking about doing and they're like, "Oh, but you got this opportunity because you're a woman or you got this opportunity because you're a green beret." But no, you asked the right question and like prompted the conversation to open up that opportunity. Whereas, like I said, I think a lot of times, especially men, are afraid to ask questions and afraid to ask for help and like see where those things can go. And I think you're like a prime example of it. Sounds like, yeah, it was just a conversation that started with an outfitter and one thing led to another. And now you're getting to guide other Green Berets, other SEALs, other special operations folks. And I think that is such an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I'm so excited for it. And so you want to talk about training? I've had to tweak my training, right? Because prior to this, I was just exercise and exercise, right? But now
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is a no shit green cycle. Like I'm heading out the door, right? You know? So And this is a brand new environment. I've never been to Alaska. I've never hunted these animals, so totally new environment, but I'm treating it a lot like, because I was an intel guy on an ODA, so I was a special forces intelligence sergeant when I retired.
Yeah.
And so, I'm putting this plan together. I'm doing the intel preparation of the battlefield. I'm figuring out like, what does Alaska look like? What's the weather like? All these other things, then of course the enemy, right? Which, not really the enemy, but the bear or the moose. So I'm trying to learn all that. And then I'm trying to train myself to be able to function in there. The last time I did a like backpacking style trip, I made it 6 miles and my knee stopped working. And I had to basically just hunker down for a day before I could get out of there. So like I can't do that in Alaska, right? So I've kind of tweaked my training, going back to that training piece we were talking about, where I periodized saying it wrong. You know what I'm
Period.
saying? Yes, yes. But anyways, my trainings, build like I started off like during this past season, just doing like a base strength program, and
Mm-hmm.
then started adding in conditioning postseason. So I'm still doing strength conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started adding more, staying with strength, but adding in more endurance. And now I'm on an endurance program, and so my whole goal is to be able to move 5 miles across rough terrain with 60 pounds on my back,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm at 58.
Nice.
But this is all preparation for this Alaska trip, because
Mm.
now I've already got clarification when I'm not carrying any moose quarters or anything like that. So I got the contract. He's like, must be able to carry 150 pounds 3 miles or something like that. So I called him up. I was like, you remember I'm disabled, right? Like, I'm not doing that. He's like, no, you're good. We have Packers. Cool.
Sweet.
But I'm
Okay.
like, I got to carry my, yeah, I still have to carry my own gear and then still be able to function, because if I'm going to help guide somebody else, like, they're putting their lives in my hands, like not only the success of the animal, but I've got to be able to take care of them, make sure they're safe, and be able to get them out. And so I'm like, man, I can't not be able to carry my gear and still be able to function. And like I said, so far I'm 58 pounds,
Nice.
5 miles, and I can function at the end of it. So we're going to find out Sunday if I can add that extra 2 pounds and be all right. But,
Nice.
going from, like I said, not even being able to pick up a barbell off the floor to now I'm moving over rough terrain with 60 pounds or almost 60 pounds. Yeah. And it's all because I finally started listening to the stuff that my strength conditioning and my physical therapist told me to do.
Told you years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think first, yeah, that's going to be an incredible experience. I'm stoked for you, and I can't wait to hear about it afterwards. But even like you said, you now realize you've been removed from a human performance group who has educated you on what you needed to do. And while you might not have taken advantage of it then at the time, you see now, like, okay, I do want to, like, longevity is a big thing that is becoming like popular, especially in the military space, but even outside of that. Um, that you want to be able to be this adventurer for a really long time. It's so much fun, and you can do really cool things. You can go really cool places. You can meet really cool people. So now, how can we prolong that to where you can do it for years and years to come? And you recognize the training piece of that plays a big role into it, but you have to do it in a smart way. You
Yeah.
can't just train and do whatever the hell you want to do and kick your shit in every single time you work out. You have to, like, okay, I have to sustainably build up to that 60 pounds for 5 miles. I can't just throw 60 pounds on my back one morning and then go 5 miles, because for you that might be painful. That might not be good for you. But
Yeah.
through, yeah, some education and things that you've learned, you've recognized, like, to be sustainable and to be able to do that, you have to work up to that. Which is
Yep.
kind of like I started with. I think I'm not going to say most coaches, a good coach or a good physical therapist or a good dietitian, their goal is to educate. Their goal is never to force you to do things that you don't want to do. Their goal is never to hurt you. Their goal is never to put you in a bad position. Ultimately, their goal is to educate you. And if you just so much as like take one piece of advice from them, like, they're going to be happy people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's a lot like my old job. You're almost trying to work yourself out of a job, at least with the Thor side of the house, right? They're trying to teach you how to be able to take care of yourself. Because
Mhm.
they're not going to Afghanistan or wherever with you. So you've got to be able to function without them, and they've got to be able to get you to that point. And they did with me. I just didn't realize, and it probably took longer than most folks. I'm a little hard headed. But yeah, like all that stuff, like I said, just going back and thinking about things. And then, some of the other people I met through because of Thor, like I had a physical therapist that was off post.
Mm-hmm.
One of our guys on the team down in the Southwest, he's a zone chiropractor.
Mm-hmm.
Like I met him through the Green Beret Foundation. He does a lot of stuff with them, and he's trying to get linked in with Thor as well. But like just guys like that, like like they're not just there to manipulate you, crack you, or whatever. They I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was so jacked up, I had to use my cane. I went to go see a concert in Nashville with the kids, and I'm hobbling around Nashville using a cane, right? Whereas, I've been doing really well all summer. Now all of a sudden, I've got a cane. My hip is just jacked up. I can't move very well. And so I called him up, and I'm like, hey man, my hip's jacked up. And he's like, I talked about the pain, where's it coming from, where's it going, all this. And he's like, yep, it's your L1 and L2. You need to get this, start doing this. And within 2 days, I was off the cane, back and rolling again, you know? And,
Yeah.
and now I know, like, once I start to kind of get that, I can help myself. So it's huge, that huge education piece. It's been awesome. Just, yeah, Thor, the Green Beret Foundation, all that's really done a lot of cool stuff for me.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of this double edged sword because, like I said, and even I worked in a physical therapy clinic before I went to grad school, and there was a chiropractor in there as well. And most chiropractors' goals are to keep you as like a long term client or a long term patient and coming in over and over again. But a good chiropractor is going to teach you how you can take care of yourself outside of the treatment that you're having. And so they're going to include some physical therapy exercises, some rehab exercises that you can do at home so you don't have to keep coming into them all the time. You don't have to be dependent on them. And same thing with a coach or a personal trainer or whomever. Like, yeah, maybe it'd be cool to be able to work with these people, but I always see it as like, especially say I'm working with a unit, is I want these guys to come in, I want them to learn, and then the reason that they're going to keep coming in is not because they still need me, but it's because we have just created this environment where it's like it's fun to be there, or it's a fun place to work out, or an enjoyable place to be, or a stress-free place to be. So the
Sorry,
environment, it's okay.
my dog just put his head next to the computer and just yawned super
I
loud.
heard that was funny. But yeah, instead of like them being dependent on those people for X amount of time, it is, oh, I'm just going to keep going because I like the environment that they've created for
Yeah.
me.
Well, I mean, you build a relationship with your coaches. We talked about this last time. Like, your coaches become your buddies. They become almost your therapist. You know, guys go in there and just kind of unload the world's problems on their coach. And just talk it through and deal with it in the weight room. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I love my garage gym, so it'd be hard to get me to go back to another gym with a coach physically in person. But yeah, I loved going to the Thor gym, working out with the coaches. Even the physical therapist. One of my last physical therapists before I retired did a lot of strength conditioning stuff as well. So like he was acting as both my strength conditioning coach and physical therapist.
Nice.
And he was also a big bow hunter too. So awesome to talk shop with him, learned a lot from him, not just physical therapy stuff, but bow hunting as well. So
Yeah, sweet.
that's
I
it's
love
such a cool thing. The community, bow hunting community, the strength conditioning community, and all that. Like it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think there's as I always say, there's bad eggs in every basket, but for the most part, I've met really awesome people, and there's been really good things that have come out of it. But we are coming up on an hour here, Kerri. I always end these episodes asking my guest, "What does wild strength mean to you?" or "What comes to your mind when you think of wild strength?"
What comes to my mind when I think of wild strength? I don't know. Honestly, kind of makes me think of like physical and mental fortitude to kind of do what we're supposed to do, to be a part of that natural world, to break away from the comforts of the artificial world. That's kind of what comes to mind. I don't know. I'll probably think of like a really good answer like 10, 20
Afterwards.
minutes.
No, I think that's perfect. And I love asking the question because I get such different answers. Like it is kind of an on the spot question, but they're all very similar and allude to similar things that you just said. And that was kind of my intent. And the name of the podcast is that yes, it is all things wild and hunting and outdoors, and then all things strength and conditioning and human performance. But like I think when you put those two things together, like wild strength itself is like the fortitude to just like get out there and to enjoy like what life has to offer ultimately. And so great answer. And if you come up with another one in 20 minutes, don't hesitate to let me know either. But
Will do.
if people want to find you, if they want to follow up on your Alaska adventure and see how that went, or if maybe there's other guys who were in special operations who listen to this and they want to speak to you about hunting or anything like that, where can people find you?
So Instagram is probably the easiest. It's Kerri TM84. That's KERRITM 84. Yeah, I try to stay active on there. I mean, I'm not an Insta famous person, but I figure if I can help a few people, then awesome. So I try to use that platform for that.
Sweet.